Good evening. It's Tuesday, the 14th of October. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. Officials at the Foreign Ministry are today blasting the British Parliament over its passage of a non-binding resolution calling for recognition of a Palestinian state. Israeli leaders say that such a move would harm rather than help the Palestinians and are otherwise dismissing the symbolic gesture. We get more in this report from IBA's R.A. O'Sullivan.
Right, honourable gentleman.
In a vote 274 to 12, British lawmakers decided to recognize Palestine as a state. It was said to be a symbolic move, but some members of the parliament said it was the only way to pressure the Israeli government to move forward with the peace initiative.
The only thing the Israeli government, in my view, under its present demeanour of Bibi Netanyahu, understands is pressure. And what this House will be doing this evening will be to add to the pressure on the government of Israel.
His comments were countered by Conservative MPs.
But you know, recognizing a state should only happen when the territory in question has got the basic requirements of a state. And through no fault of the Palestinians, that is not true at the moment, and it does seem to me that the resolution before us is premature.
British Prime Minister David Cameron abstained from the vote and made it clear that the resolution would not change its position on the Palestinian-Israeli issue, which is that London would only recognize a Palestinian state if it helped the peace process. Here in Jerusalem, visiting Conservative MP David Burrows from North London said the move was insignificant and Cameron's statesman's approach was good for Israel.
I'd encourage people not to look so much at the debate, or indeed the vote last night, but look at the Prime Minister's speech to the Knesset. It's as good then as it is good now and shows the deep, long-lasting, considered and long-term friendship there is between Israel and the British government, which is led by a Conservative Prime Minister. Perhaps what it shows now is where Labour is laying in and is looking at short-term political expediency and not the serious long-term statesman-like approach that the British Prime Minister has shown and is still showing.
Officials in Jerusalem slammed the unilateral moves by Britain and others, saying the Palestinians' attempts to bypass direct peace negotiations wouldn't work.
We definitely believe that any attempt to bypass the direct negotiation between Israel and the Palestinians and to count on international forums like the British Parliament or Swedish Parliament or the United Nations Security Council, all these forums are not going to bring peace between Israel and Palestinians. Only direct negotiation based on profound understanding of the Israeli security needs and the national fears and frustrations of both people will eventually make us trust an agreement. And this is what happened between us and Egypt 40 years ago. It happened between us and Jordan 20 years ago. And it will happen with the Palestinians once they will understand that the only way to our heart is through direct negotiation and not through any attempt to single out Israel in the international community.
Still with no peace talks on the agenda, the Palestinians continue to focus their efforts on gaining diplomatic milestones in the international arena. The question is, will it change reality? R.A. O'Sullivan for IBA News.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon today traveled to the Gaza Strip to see for himself the extent of the damage caused during the recent 50-day conflict with Israel. The short visit took place under tight security. Ban later told reporters that he visited the sites with a heavy heart and found the level of destruction beyond description. His visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories came just days after Europe, the United States, and Arab donor countries attending a conference in Cairo pledged $5.4 billion for the reconstruction of Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel facilitated the first transfer of building materials to the Gaza Strip today, including 600 tons of cement, 50 truckloads of aggregates, and 10 truckloads of iron. The entry of the goods was overseen by UN employees and Palestinian Authority officials in accordance with the Egyptian-sponsored agreement to ensure that none of the material will be used by Hamas to rebuild its terrorist infrastructure. Ban traded barbs with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu soon after arriving in the country yesterday over Israel's role in the stalled peace talks with the Palestinians. The UN chief criticized Israel for being what he called the root cause of instability in the region, guilty of a restrictive occupation that has lasted almost half a century, the continued denial of Palestinian rights, and the lack of tangible progress in peace negotiations. Netanyahu hit back, saying that the root cause of violence that burst from Gaza is not Israel's occupation in Gaza, for the simple reason that Israel is not occupying Gaza. He went on to say that the root cause of this summer's outburst of violence was the Hamas rocketing of Israeli cities. Netanyahu also warned Ban against supporting unilateral Palestinian moves for statehood recognition at the UN.
I believe that unilateral steps by the Palestinians at the United Nations will not advance peace. I think they'll do the very opposite. They'll bring about a further deterioration in the situation, something none of us want.
At a meeting with President Reuven Rivlin, the UN Secretary General insisted that Gaza needs to be rebuilt through the easing of Israeli restrictions. Rivlin responded that Israelis understand that a solution should be found regarding the closure on the Gaza Strip because over 1.5 million Palestinians cannot continue living under the closure. He went on to say, however, that the lifting of restrictions on Gaza can only take place after the Palestinian leadership and the international community find a way to dismantle Hamas terrorist capabilities and ensure that Israeli civilians will be able to live in safety.
The reconstruction of Gaza is an Israeli interest as much as a Palestinian one. Our Palestinian neighbors in Gaza are held captive by Hamas. They deserve a better and safe life.
Minister of Justice Tzipi Livni also told the visiting UN Secretary General that it is important to oppose Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas' unilateral moves to achieve statehood through the UN, adding that the failure to do so will send the PA leader the message that he can avoid negotiations.
I truly believe that the vision of two states for two peoples represents the interest of Israel, but the only way to achieve and establish a Palestinian state goes through negotiations with Israel. So basically, by having these kind of unilateral decisions in different parts of the world can give Mahmoud Abbas the notion or the understanding that there's no need to negotiate the Palestinian state, and I believe that this is a mistake.
In other news, a mosque was set on fire and vandalized overnight in the West Bank town of Aqraba near Nablus in what police suspect was an attack by far-right Jewish extremists. The assailants spray-painted graffiti that contained spelling errors in Hebrew on the external walls of the Muslim house of worship, reading price tag and Tapuach is Kahana, referring to the nearby Tapuach settlement and the late ultranationalist Rabbi Meir Kahana. The vandals also smashed a window at the mosque and threw flammable material inside. Damage was caused to several prayer books and a rug, although no injuries were reported. President Rivlin strongly condemned the attack, saying that the burning of places of worship is terror and should be dealt with as such, irregardless of whether the acts were perpetrated for nationalistic, racial, or religious motives. Police in Jerusalem have released video demonstrating the severity of violence that they faced while attempting to disperse Palestinian rioters from the Temple Mount in the Old City yesterday. The footage was publicized shortly after UN Secretary General Ban chastised Israel against provocations at holy sites in Jerusalem. Acting on intelligence information that Palestinians were planning to attack Israelis permitted to visit the Temple Mount compound yesterday, police raided the site where they found stockpiles of rocks and firebombs prepared for use. Clashes erupted as security forces pushed the rioters inside of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and dismantled the barricades that they'd erected and eventually restored calm. Turning to the besieged Syrian town of Kobani, where U.S.-led coalition forces launched airstrikes against Islamic State fighters this morning. Explosions were heard from the Turkish side of the border just kilometers away. Ankara has so far refused to engage in any direct military intervention to help the Kurdish defenders of the town because of their ties to the outlawed PKK Kurdish Workers' Party that Turkey brands a terrorist organization. It was today cleared for publication that Ankara ordered warplanes to bomb PKK targets in southeast Turkey on Sunday in response to the group's attacks on a military outpost in the Hakkari province near the border with Iraq 3 days prior, and the first significant air operation against the Kurdish group since the launching of the peace process between the sides 2 years ago in a bid to end an insurgency that killed 40,000 people over the past 3 decades. And meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama will attend a meeting with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, and the foreign defense chiefs of 20 nations, including Turkey and Saudi Arabia, at Andrews Air Force Base today. in an attempt to form a more effective strategy to counter the Islamic State advances. The sister of ISIS hostage, John Cantley, is appealing for the radical group to reopen dialogue with the family. The British journalist was captured in Syria in November of 2012 and has appeared in a series of Islamic State propaganda videos called Lend Me Your Ears. In a televised statement, Jessica Cantley said that she is speaking on behalf of the family because her father Paul is terminally ill and incapacitated. After calling her brother's words during the ISIS broadcast powerful and having a huge resonance, she strongly denied that there has been no previous contact with the group.
It is not true to say that there has been no attempt to engage with IS. It is simply not accurate. This is frustrating for all parties, including those who are trying to assist us. We had previously been in contact through a channel started by you, but this stopped for reasons best known to you. Sadly, like the families of David Haynes and Alan Henning before they were killed, our efforts at reopening dialogue continue to be ignored by those holding John. We strongly challenge those holding John to return to your previously opened channel, to which we continue to send messages and await your response, so that in keeping with everyone's wishes, we can restart dialogue. We implore IS to reinitiate direct contact.
Back here at home, dozens of Christian parliamentarians from around the world are currently in the capital to attend the two-day Jerusalem Chairman's Conference of the Israel Allies Foundation. According to Likud member of Knesset, Gila Gamliel, who heads the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, the insight that the legislators can gain during their visit will help them to better monitor the financial contributions that their own governments have made to rebuild Gaza.
All these members of parliament that are coming to Israel and are sitting together, and you see it's almost 30 members of parliament that are here for 3 days, and they are together with us thinking about what they can help Israel in their state. And when they are coming here, and we speak about every year they are coming, and we speak about what our needs, especially this time we see that the money that their government bringing to the Palestinians are going to terror organization, to the Hamas. We see what's happening with UNRWA in the operation of Tzuk Eitan. And what we need them is to see where the money is go. Of course, when we heard about the $5.4 billion that needs to come now to Gaza Strip, we need that it will be very sensitive about exactly where the money is going, that it won't go again to the terror organization.
The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is currently hosting its annual week-long celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles. Ahead of the event, I discussed its significance with ICEJ Executive Director Dr. Jürgen Bühler.
The Feast of Tabernacles is very important for millions of Christians around the world for many reasons. Number one, it's the celebration which is the only biblical feast which also Gentiles are invited to come to Jerusalem. So the prophet Zechariah says that the time will come when the Gentiles will make pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. And then at the same time, it's probably today the largest solidarity rally taking place here in the land, where many Christians around the world realize that if they want to show their support for Israel and for the Jewish people, it's the time of Sukkot. We have the Jerusalem March, where they can walk through the streets of Jerusalem. We have celebrations in the Pace Arena this year, the big basketball stadium, where thousands of Christians will be there. So it's the number one event where you can show your support and your love for the state of Israel.
I know this is an annual event. Are you seeing a fewer number of participants this year because of the aftermath of Operation Protective Edge?
It looks right now, we are approximately 20% ahead of last year, which for us is a miracle because you just said it, the protective edge actually caused a lot of tourists not to come to Israel, but we see the opposite, that maybe even Christians say we want to show our support right now in this difficult situation to the state of Israel.
Tell me just a little bit more about the highlights of this year's program, including the event at the Pius Stadium in Jerusalem.
Well, this will be the first international event in the PACE arena. It will be the very first international convention which will take place there. And I know many of our pilgrims, they are very eager and very excited to see this new venue, which is the largest in the city of Jerusalem, and to see this new property. But also other highlights will be that we are expecting, for example, a group of 8 Kurdish pastors. We are still waiting for their permit to enter into the country, but those people, they come to Jerusalem and they want to pray during Sukkot for the independence of their country. And so there are Christian leaders which are coming here to pray in Jerusalem for their own community. We will have one of the leading Christians in the Arab world today, which is under radical Islamic threat right now, Canon Andrew White, the Bishop of Baghdad. He will be with us, and he will share about his unique experience with ISIS and how the Christian community in Baghdad is experiencing right now this conflict. We will have some of the key denominational leaders from around the world. Prince Gunaratnam, a pastor from Malaysia, who is today the new head of the World Pentecostal Assembly, which is a global movement of around 200 to 300 million followers around the world. So it's a very exciting feast, and a very mixed group of parliamentarians, ministers from Africa are coming from 6 different countries, so it will be very interesting.
I know, it really sounds like it. Now, the people who come here, the participants, they not only come themselves to show a great display of support for Israel, but they also make a very significant contribution to the Israeli economy, don't they?
Well, according to Globes, now this week of Sukkot will be mean something like $30 million on financial impact to the economy in Israel. So just for them to come here, to stay here in Israeli hotels, to spend money on gifts and presents, will inject a huge number of dollars into the Israeli financial system. But at the same time, they also came to support certain projects here in this land. Just a few weeks ago, when Operation Protective Edge was going on, they were supporting bomb shelters around the Gaza communities, outside of Gaza, of course. They were taking Israeli citizens which were affected by the bombings out to more safer areas. One group was going for a holiday to Czech Republic. Others we took to the Dead Sea. Others we took up to the Galilee. So those people, they are standing not only now during Sukkot, but during the year they are the best supporters and friends of the State of Israel.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. As mentioned in that interview, one of the week's most important events during the Feast of Tabernacles is the annual Jerusalem March, which is ongoing at this hour. An estimated 5,000 visiting Christians made up by far the largest international contingency, representing 100 different nations, all displaying their support of Jerusalem and the State of Israel. Tens of thousands of others are also marching in the capital, including Israeli groups from public bodies, trade organizations, and IDF soldiers from a number of military units. While residents of the city say that they appreciate the enormous show of solidarity, once again they endured a long day of sealed streets along the parade route and the resulting massive traffic jams. Turning to scientific breakthroughs, and an Israeli high-tech firm has come up with an early detection device to prevent cervical cancer in women. Mobile OCT makes use of cell phones to bring the treatment to patients, as we see in this report from Ayelet Saban of Israel Up Close.
Every 2 minutes, a woman dies of cervical cancer. It is the leading cause of cancer death among women in developing countries. When Dr. David Levitt approached his childhood friend, startup entrepreneur Ariel Be'eri, with an idea to create a cost-effective cervical cancer screening device for smartphones, Mobile OCT, a life-changing as well as life-saving Israeli startup, was soon underway.
The second that you can enable people to access advanced medical care on their phone anywhere, you change the world. Because 5 billion people have access to mobile phones, but few of those have access to a physician, especially when they need that physician most. And so if you can enable people to save lives just with their phone, the game changes. All of a sudden, healthcare is accessible to all. All of a sudden, people who died before their time can live out their lives. And all of a sudden, you also create business models for local people who can act as those points of care.
If cervical cancer is caught in its early stages, it can be treated for less than $28, saving the lives of 250,000 women annually. The application, which can be pulled up on any smartphone when attached to a supplied lens, handle and light, can easily capture images of the cervix. The device is compact, mobile and user-friendly.
Health workers in Africa can take these images, they go into the cell phone, they get beamed up to our server. A well-trained colposcopist can look at the image and send information back to the clinician, hopefully in real time, whether they should treat the woman or not treat the woman.
After creating a workable prototype, Mobile OCT released 5 devices which are successfully working in the field in Haiti, Kenya, Botswana, Mexico and the United States. Another 42 will go out by year's end. The product is constantly being improved and updated.
Our strategy has been to produce what we call a minimal viable product, that is the simplest thing that can get out there and start saving lives, and to do that quickly.
The grand vision of Mobile OCT is to move on to creating similar devices for other cancers that are difficult to check but can be diagnosed at a distance if the right technologies are brought to bear.
One of the things that Mobile OCT is aware of and dedicated to is understanding that the State of Israel can be a platform for world-changing behavior. So on the very basis of tikkun olam, of fixing the world, which is deeply within our value set, that's what motivates us, and that's why we do what we do.
This is Ayelet Saban reporting for Israel Up Close.
In other international news, a giant female panda has been released into the wild at a nature reserve in southwest China's Sichuan province. The bear is named Shui Shui, meaning snow, and was seemingly somewhat nervous about her newfound freedom and reluctant to take her first steps at first. Researchers at the Liziping Nature Reserve say that they believe that the 2-year-old's cautious behavior stemmed from the 2-day trip to the release point, as well as the unfamiliar environment and, perhaps most importantly, the separation from her mother. Another exciting and colorful, family-friendly event over the Sukkot holiday here at home is the International Hot Air Balloon Festival. Balloonists came from all over the world to participate in the event that opened in the north of the country yesterday and continued today over one of the most scenic areas in the country, Mount Gilboa in the Galilee, overlooking the plains of the Jezreel Valley. The event included food stands, shows, concerts by local singers, and some of the participants even camped outdoors. Later tonight, the event will relocate to the south of the country, and the festival will continue tomorrow at the visually stunning Eshkol Park in the Negev. Taking a look at local finance, and the shekel put in a mixed performance while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were down across the board. Here's a look at today's final numbers. The IBA weather team says we can expect a chilly, wet day tomorrow with unseasonably low temperatures and occasional rain showers over much of the country from the north to the Negev. Here's the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this evening. This programming note before leaving you, IBA News will be broadcast at our special holiday time of 5:10 p.m. both tomorrow and on Wednesday.